Hello and a very warm welcome everybody to another episode of The Joy of Basing with me, Cexwish. Today we will be building a Blood Bowl pitch base. Blood Bowl is one of the best and coolest games that has ever been created. I'm a huge fan for many years, and I'm very happy that Games Workshop decided to release the new edition of it not so long ago. So we will be building one base that is like the side of the pitch, exactly at the space where the fans cheer to the team. And then we will build another base which shows the scoreboard, which could also be something like an advertising board for Buckman's 5X, or one of the sponsors of the Blood Bowl teams. Before we begin, it is important to have a look at the real life reference. As you can see, there are many different types of grass, artificial, turfs and natural ones, but they all have something in common. First of all, they have to have some markings on them. Yeah, you need these lines that show you what yard line you actually have, and you need to mark down the zone where a touchdown is scored. The grass comes in different shades, so to make it easier for the spectator to see on which distance the player is, they have a changing pattern of a little lighter green and a little bit darker green. Also, some of the lines are painted green and not white, and all these things are really good to know about if you want to recreate the ambience of a Blood Bowl pitch. Also notice that there's not only grass, there are also these spots of grass that is already dead because it was in the sun, was exposed to the sun a little bit too long, or these areas where there is a lot of manual abrasion from the shoes of the players. There is no grass on there, only the soil that is underneath that shows through the turf. The interesting thing about that is that it's not only a difference in texture and color, but also in the humidity. So these spots are very visible and mostly quite dark.
Here you see the materials that we will need to have to build the Blood Bowl pitch bases. Please find the complete list in the description below. First, we will mix ourselves some nice and dirty pitch soil. It's an earth mix that consists of basically 4 different materials: Moltofill, the PVA wood glue, the pigment and the earth soil. There is no exact ratio to all this, simply mix in the 4 components together until you get a nice muddy black paste. And we want to do this because we want to create a rugged and heavily used earth look, so something that is really wet and dirty. I use a very fast curing wood glue. It's called Ponal Express from the German company Henkel. It's a PVA wood glue and it's very fast because we don't have time to lose. There is also a PVA Ponal with a blue label that dries so water can't solve it afterwards, but we don't necessarily need that here. I always try to mix in some black pigments to any materials I use when building a base. The reason behind that is that a game like Blood Bowl is a board game with a lot of heavy manual use to the base. So the bases need to be very sturdy and resistant to rough handling. If some chipping will occur, and trust me, it always will, the chipped edges will remain black and the material is colored through, so it's not simply painted on the surface. Here I am roughing up the top of the dice box to give the paste something to stick to. This way the base will remain on the top and it won't come off so easily. Now we are smearing the paste onto the surface, and notice how I first shovel a large amount on top of the base and then I distribute it evenly over the whole surface. You can keep a very rugged and wild look or flatten the top out using a piece of cork. When you use the piece of cork, you will also want to use a small stick that will then solve the base from the cork again, and then you can just straighten the surface up again as good as new. For the second base, we will try to create a more wild and beaten look with some of these holes in the ground that we have seen in the field references. It's a similar start, but we are dabbing the paste in smaller motions and don't need to flatten it out on the cork afterwards. For the smaller bases, we also need to roughen up the surface before putting the soil paste on. Make sure to clean the edges up before the paste dries. Okay, so much for the soil. Next up, we will build some wooden fence structures to protect our athletes from overly enthusiastic Blood Bowl fans. I'm using a 5x1mm and 4x1mm, which equals 0.2 and 0.05 inches of styrene strips or plastic card. They are different manufacturers, but I really like to use Evergreen, although they are pretty expensive, so when I can find something that is a little bit more cheap, then I go for that. Since we want to achieve a very sun-worn and rather weathered look, I'm chipping the sharp edges from the plank away. For this, we use a very sharp blade and work our way down the sides. It is a bit hard to see on the footage, sorry for the overexposure, but you have to work down on one side of the plank, flip the whole piece 180 degrees around and repeat the chipping on the other side. That way you will get a differentiated look for your board with many facets that catch the light coming from above, making your wooden plank look more interesting. I also use some beaten old side clippers to add some more randomness to the plank. I strongly recommend using books about woodworking and wooden constructions and online references about wooden joints to find out how the constructions really work in real life. Next, I cut one side of the board into a spike that we will then use to create a hole in the still wet soil. The more we know about how something was built, the more precise we can recreate that progress. The better the result will eventually be. So regarding our little pitch railing here, these boards need to be joined together somehow, otherwise they would just fall down the ground. Because you cannot really superglue them in reality. So we will build small nails using something I call the salami technique. For this, we cut really tiny little nail heads from a styrene rod and glue them in place wherever we need them. You should also check and adjust the length of your construction and clip the recess with your clippers if needed. In this case you can really see that a little bit of the planks is overlapping, so it's good to just clip them away. For variation, you might also want to build larger, more complex wooden structures. In this case, I would like to build an additional scoreboard or advertising board for my team. Again, we take a look at how signs like that are usually built in woodworking books and cut styrene strips into planks. Although the strips are not super heavy, it is still recommended to pin them at aesthetically critical places, like in joint areas or weak spots. I use a little hand drill, as you can see here, It's quite handy, and you can use it with different sizes of drill bits. So you can drill a hole even after gluing the two pieces together, and then drive a pin through with some glue on it, which will really help to attach everything together and hold it in place. Here I glued myself to the sign, but this is nothing that is so bad. We can simply cut it away afterwards. Use a file to file down the metal rods that are sticking out. I'm using simple paper clips for the rods. Apply rivets or nails, again using the salami techniques, wherever you think it's necessary or where you have drilled a hole. Now that the soil is dry, it's time to clean up the edges using 400 grain sanding paper. You can use a brush to get rid of the sanding particles. If you want to create an advertising sign, for example for Bachmann's or the banner of your team, you can flatten a piece of green stuff or other putty that is elastic between the table and a small glass bottle and allow it to cure. Then you can cut a small strip using a metal ruler and your hobby knife. Put in some nails into the corners and the banner for added realism, because the banner has to be attached to the wooden plank somehow. I'm using P3's Bootstrap leather and Battlefield Brown mainly as a heavy base layer for the base. Then I use Vallejo Model Wash Dark Brown and Dark Yellow to wash it down a little bit. Then we will be using the P3's Jagged Bone and Menoth White Highlight for a quick dry brush, and some Army Painter Quick Shade Strong Tone for additional depth. Here you can observe how I use wet blending to mix the Bootstrap leather with the Battlefield Brown directly on the base. It is important to mark differently colored zones and then to mix these different zones onto the base. Use water to blend the tones and use a hairdryer to speed up the drying time. Always know the property of your color. That way you will be able to incorporate satin shine or a strong gloss wherever you need it. Once again, if you look at real-life infield reference of soil, you will find that there are different color soils. Some are darker brown and some are more reddish brown, some are more yellowish brown, which has to do with the types of materials that are included in your soil. So really observe the real-life reference in order to know what you want to achieve color-wise. Once entirely dry, you can use the dark brown and dark yellow wash to add additional tones to your base. If you use the strong tone, you will get a much darker result. On this last example, I will just use some strong tone directly, and this will create a little bit like more moist look to it and also a little bit more dark and wet earth. It's just something to try out. Allow everything to dry completely once again and use some jack bone for a first gentle dry brush. With dry brushing, less is more, so really be careful with the color that you still have on the brush. It should really be just a little bit, and the color on the base should already be really dry, otherwise you will just smear the old color all over the base and it will not look good. Use a tiny little bit of Menoth white highlight for the very edges to finish that off. Since dry brushing often results in a very dusty or flat look, you can finalize the soil by gently adding some of the browns and yellow washes onto selected areas. This will bring the saturation back, which will make the base a little bit more interesting and differentiated. Now that the soil is painted, we can finally add the grass. I chose to use some long bristled summer grass mat from the manufacturer NOCH. It is called Natur Wiese Sommer. There are also other mats from other manufacturers like BUSCH or Mini Natur, but this mat here is ideal for our purposes and setting. We use the dice box as a cutting stencil to cut a nicely sized piece that we then rip into a more natural fit using our trusty clippers. Don't throw the pieces away, as you can use them later on to fill small gaps on your base. Make sure that you don't leave straight lines in your base, because that will just look artificial. Nothing is perfect in life, so we should really try to adapt that onto our bases too. In order to glue the grass piece onto our soil, we will use thick superglue. I find it practical to put the glue onto my black nitrile glove near my thumb, so I have a quick and easy access to the glue. Always remember to put the glue on the part that you want to stick on the surface, not the other way around, to avoid a sticky and just gluey flood. Apply smaller patches of grass near your wooden construction to close the gaps up. You can also rip small holes into your grass piece to create a more rugged and damaged look. As if a big guy has ripped part of the grass out with his big boots during a tackle, or while throwing an unfortunate goblin a little bit too strongly into the ground. After doing all this, there is one quite peculiar thing to do, and it might sound a little bit strange first, but we will actually shave our base using a beard groomer. If you don't happen to have a beard groomer yourself, borrow one from your father, your brother, your boyfriend, your neighbor. Just be sure to clean it after using on your base. The result is pretty similar to our infield reference. There is short grass on the pitch and a long grass on the spectator side. For the other pitch variants, like the dungeon bowl field, you can use some simple tufts. It's not rocket science, just place a couple of here and there, and that will be enough. Just make sure to use differentiated tufts. They should be quite similar from the color though, because otherwise it will just look really artificial. In order to create those fantastic white markings, we will have to mask the grass off using some paper tape. Here I'm using some Thamar masking tape and frog tape from the hardware store. Once in place, we can mix a slightly grayish off-white and apply it with an airbrush. If you don't happen to have an airbrush, you can achieve a similar effect by just using white spray can primer directly. Just make sure that you mask your base really well, because you don't want the white color to reach any area that you really don't want to reach. If you want to have a T-shaped line, you can do it as you see here with different stripes of paper tape. Only make sure to really carefully mask everything down and to keep everything according to the right angle. And use some of the thicker frog tape on the bottom of the base, because that spray dust, it will just reach everything on the base if you don't mask it down. With your airbrush, apply the color quite carefully and try to keep the right angle so the color reaches the base just from the very top, just straight down. You can also print numbers of your choice onto a sheet of paper and carefully build yourself a stencil by cutting them out with your fine hobby knife. It is good to learn how to print documents at the scale that you need them to be. You can use programs like Photoshop or Illustrator or some free software also to achieve that. For the best result, apply the paint with an airbrush and just let your imagination run. The construction can really emphasize the dynamic of your figure, so the catcher will look more dramatic, reaching out for that ball just right under the score sign. Your grassy Blood Bowl pitch base is now built and it's ready to be painted on.